1987, something really, really weird happened. If you thought astrology was out there, you haven't seen anything yet. Because human design, a system that incorporates astrology, the Chinese I Ching, and a few other sources, has a very weird backstory. In 1987, a Canadian man born in Montreal called Alan Robert Krakauer had a mystical experience with what he calls a voice. And all good cult stories start out with something like this, but I'll get to that. Staying in the island of Ibiza at the time, Alan took instructions from this voice and essentially was taught the information of human design and spent the rest of his life teaching it and analyzing people's charts. He was 38 at the time. Although it's only really been around just over 35 years now, human design is also seeing a surge of popularity, especially since COVID. Human design isn't so far off from astrology, as it uses planetary positions and the tropical zodiac as a basis for interpretation and all of its extra information. Human design is said to be a synthesis of a few different systems, astrology being the fundamental one, with the positions of the planets being mapped out to a tropical zodiac. But instead of zodiac signs, we have hexagrams from the Chinese Book of Changes, the I Ching, called gates, with subdivisions of the hexagram being called lines. In this image, the personality sun being positioned in hexagram 12, line 1. The I Ching is an ancient Chinese divination system, also known as the Chinese Book of Changes, which comes from ancient China around 1000 BC. The hexagrams are 64 symbols made up of 6 broken or unbroken lines, being a yin or yang line. The hexagrams represent different situations or conditions in life and are interpreted as dynamic patterns that reflect the changes and interactions of archetypal human experience. It's very much tied in with Taoism, emphasizing the constant flow and change of life. So here comes back our favorite founding father of modern psychotherapy, Carl Jung, who's also said to have used the I Ching as part of his psychological studies. I think he'd be very interested in this system today. With human design, we basically have the tropical zodiac divided into 64 hexagrams with their individual lines, up to 6 lines, with the planets being placed there, again, based on the time, place, and location of birth. An auric type is derived from the activations in the chart, a profile type, a decision-making authority center, and many other variables. Now, when I was first studying this system, my cult alarm went off hugely. Because I almost refused to consider that it could be real or make any sense. At first glance, it's just like someone bombed a New Age convention center and was scrambling to put the remaining mess into a system and then trying to convince everyone that it worked, and then hid every single learning material behind a paywall. So I consider myself open-minded, but even I thought this was just way, way too out there. My brain was refusing to accept it. My cult alarms were going off. But at the same time, I tried to remain open-minded and I tried to learn it step by step because my curiosity got the better of me. However, I do recognize more value in the system now. The information is so vast and can hurt your brain sometimes, and practitioners often use that fact to paywall it. But I found it significantly validating in a few different ways and personally think it's very much worthy of further study. Personally, I'm just put off by the intense marketing and paywalling. Then again, there is so much content and calculation behind this system. It's not a simple system that can be learned in a year or two. There's been an international community around human design for over 30 years. And I think only now, after the internet era, is it getting its full recognition. One cool thing I learned about the I Ching, which is a fundamental part of the human design system, is that it has 64 hexagrams of 6 lines each. So it's a bit like a 64-bit computer. The use of yin and yang lines are a binary system after all, and could represent a 1 or a 0, which is the basis of modern computing. Strangely enough, in the study of genetics, there are 64 codons in the genetic code corresponding to the 20 amino acids that make up protein. There are even many academics and scholars writing published papers on these strange connections between the I Ching and genetics. And whilst it's a stretch, practitioners do believe that to some extent, the planetary influence has an impact on our genetics, and therefore our personality structure, energy levels, amongst other variables. Now, I know how ridiculously out there and insane and woo-ish and culty this sounds. I fully understand. This is probably the single most woo-woo thing I've come across. And it really took some time for me to digest the key information without outright rejecting it. And whilst no organization who's trying to get that information out is perfect, the team behind the teaching and the marketing of the system worldwide have done a brilliant job at it, considering it came from one guy and had to carry that for 30 years. So we seem to have a good synthesis of astrology, chakras, the Seraphot, and the I Ching in one diagram. And that diagram, again, being unique to each individual. This is crazy considering that Alan Krakauer essentially just claims he had a crazy experience with a voice teaching him this information over a week. The guy who received it was certainly no saint. He was an eccentric guy. But this type of access to new knowledge isn't unique. It's very similar to Ramanujan, the Indian mathematician whose theorems made a foundational contribution to modern computing. He claims he saw different mathematical formulas when in a dream state, praying to his family's Hindu god. So do we devalue his contributions because of the way he claims he accessed that knowledge? In ancient Indian Vedic tradition, Shruti, that which is heard, refers to the body of most authoritative ancient sacred texts comprising the central canon of Hinduism. Can't pronounce Sanskrit, but these texts are considered apurasaya, or not of human origin, and are believed to have been revealed to ancient sages, the rishis, through direct spiritual experiences. Adi Shankaracharya, an ancient Indian sage, said around the 8th century CE that Shruti is the ultimate pramana, or means of knowledge. He emphasizes that logic and reasoning must be subservient to Shruti in matters beyond the empirical. Shruti is not subject to error as it comes from a divine, non-human source. In other words, the ancient Indians saw it as a legitimate means of gaining knowledge, even though our modern rational scientific society would demean any source of transrational knowledge and label it as pre-rational. This is called the pre-trans fallacy, where transrational sciences or transrational means of gaining information are confused by the modern scientific establishment as being pre-rational, something akin to mythical, magical, tribal-like thinking, summoning rain dances or asking the gods, whereas in fact these are transrational systems which go beyond just logic and rationality as a whole.